Thank you very much, Michael. My name is Charles Lincoln, and I'll be discussing how the legal environment on the domestic side interacts with the legal environment on the international side, specifically how the domestic environment and regulation must be in harmony with international treaties the U.S. has signed on to. Indeed, this can often be a complicated process as the domestic legislation is a little less than 2,000 pages. But starting off, first, Buy American came about in 1933, outlining the domestic preference rules for the U.S. government procurement. In 1948, the General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs came into effect that allowed for domestic preference for government procurement, but prohibited domestic preference legislation in the private sector. In 1993, NAFTA came about and required that the federal government consider Mexican and Canadian manufacturers as being domestic manufacturers for U.S. government procurement purposes, as long as those contracts were over a certain minimum threshold. Incidentally, the U.S. has signed on to a number of similar agreements that allow other countries to be considered as domestic manufacturers over a minimum threshold, and this number is all the way up to 129 countries. So there are about 129 countries. There are 129 countries that have similar agreements to NAFTA in that items manufactured in those countries can be considered as domestically manufactured over a minimum threshold. So that leaves out. That leads us to the question of who is left out. And really it's the BRIC countries. It's Brazil, Russia, India, Indonesia, and China, as well as other countries such as Egypt and South Africa. So really the focus perhaps shouldn't be how do we get Mexico and Canada to fit into this paradigm of the Berry Amendment of Buy American Act, but how it focuses overall and what countries are left out. So we go to our policy options. We have three options essentially: to keep the status quo, to keep it completely as it is, or completely eliminate it, or you only keep the essential parts. Our recommendation is that we keep only the essential parts and try to keep, but thereby getting rid of the disadvantages of having the Buy American Act, but also maintaining the advantages of the Buy American Act through maintaining the advantages of the Buy American Act through other ways. And again, it perhaps shouldn't be the main goal to get Mexico and Canada to be considered as domestic manufacturers, although we could perhaps have a movement to get domestic manufacturers in the U.S., in Mexico and Canada, to lower the threshold, because really the only people who are losing in Mexico and Canada are the small companies, because big companies can meet the minimum threshold, small companies can't. So our recommendation is keep the essential parts: the Berry Amendment, the military, the security aspects. Get rid of the other disadvantages, but keep the advantages through other means.